we started seeing, and we started learning, and it started getting better. And now, after 20 years, it is so fascinating because now we're learning. I mean, I feel like maybe just this year, I think Farmer gets all the credit for it, but we can't fly roads.
Yeah.
We have to fly over the mountains because that's where all the lift is. And holy shit, if we're just learning this now in 20 years, imagine what we can learn in the next 10, 20 years. It's magnificent.
Some funny words there from Nate Scales. He was in the last episode of the Cloudbase Mayhem podcast. If you want to laugh hysterically, I encourage you to get the rest of that one. Go back and check that out. It's a fantastic podcast. He's just got so much wisdom and great stories, and talk about the 2007 X-Alps and a whole bunch of other stuff. I think you'll really like that. This week we've got kind of an in-between cast. I was down in New Mexico a couple weeks ago with Ben Abruzzo, my trainer and very good friend, who trained me for the X-Alps this year, as well as was kind of my mountain goat during the race. So he was in charge of basically my ground game over there with Bruce, and we just had the most phenomenal time. And we've had so many questions over the last few weeks since the race about how we got ready for it. So we thought we'd shed some light on all of that. If you're not interested in the X-Alps or not interested in physical training, this is certainly an episode you could pass up on. But it was super fun sitting down with Ben. We were in his backyard, so there's all kinds of insects and bugs and dogs and airplanes flying over, but we thought it sounded really cool, so we stuck with it. I think you're going to really enjoy this. We go super deep into all the training that was involved. I basically hit the pedal October 1st last year, about a year ago, so we had a little over 9 months to prepare for the race. As he likes to say, I've got a cartilage wasteland in my knees, and so it was pretty interesting to see how he got me to a place where I could do 100K on the ground day after day, but he got me exactly where I needed to be, and how he did it I think is really cool. So I think you're going to enjoy this. Ben's an awesome personality. You can find him online on thesnowgoat.com. And without further ado, Ben Abruzzo.
Take me down to the corner of a million miles, where time is a waste of time.
They call the X-Alps the hardest race on Earth. There's a lot of hard races on Earth, and Ben's done a ton of them himself, which he'll talk about. But to give you some perspective, the end numbers after the X-Alps were pretty preposterous. I think I flew 1,560 kilometers, walked 498, and did 52,000 meters of vertical in 10 days. So think Everest 5 times. Why I say that's preposterous is because I have no cartilage in my knees. As Ben calls it, my knees are a cartilage wasteland from years of ski racing when I was young. I'm like a middle-aged white guy, 43 years old, and when I got really excited about doing this race, I realized that was going to be my major weakness. And I've never run a marathon. I've never done any kind of endurance racing at all. So, but I really like the thought of participating in this just wild and crazy event. So anyway, luckily I knew Ben was an animal and trained people, Olympians and all kinds of badasses to do really hard things, and he'd done a number of hard things. So I'm going to interview my trainer and very good friend, Ben Abruzzo. You're hearing a lot of noise in the background. We're in Ben's backyard. We're having a little bit of bourbon, enjoying the evening, and there's crickets and insects and dogs and all kinds of stuff. So forgive us for the background noise, but we thought it sounded pretty cool. Hey, dude.
Hey, man. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me in your home.
I'm thrilled to have you here. It's been fun. Adventure of sorts.
So you and I were skiing with your dad up in northern BC like almost 2 years ago now, right?
Yeah,
it wasn't last year's trip. It was the trip before that. And I said that I really wanted to, I was kind of like, I think I'd like to. It looks kind of cool, but I'm scared to death. Do the X-Alps. And your response, you knew I had really bad knees already.
That's right, yep.
But your response was what I want to get into right away. You were like, yep. Why? Did you feel like you could even turn my knees into something that, like, I'd been living with pain for 20 years. Like,
sure.
Pretty bad pain.
You know, part of it is just because I think your adventure sounded cool, and I wanted to be part of it. But after I thought about it a little more, it seemed to me that we could do this. That there's so many people out there with problems like yours, and they just don't go about it the right way. There's an amount of whatever medical condition, pain, destruction that you can't get past. But at the same time, we were there skiing, and I had seen you rip. So we knew you didn't have an instability problem. So it was like, well, how do we do this that you're comfortable so you can haul ass? And how can you get through without exploding? If you had super unstable knees and you'd had giant knee braces, I might have thought a little different about it. But I'd spent a good portion of my life training people to be fit and doing stupid stuff myself, and carrying heavy packs in the mountains is kind of one of the niches that I've done for myself and for others. And it just seemed like with your background and I knew you were an animal and would try hard that we could pull this off.
What do you kind of look for in an athlete? Because you've trained a lot of athletes. You've got some heavy guns under your belt right now that you're training, and you owned for 5 years a CrossFit gym.
Yeah, 5 years.
Albuquerque.
Yep, CrossFit Albuquerque.
And you don't own that anymore because you're running ski areas and doing some other things, and also you're doing more personal training, like with me.
Yeah, I spent, we might get into my past later, but, I spent a lot of time working with past military guys and not in a paid way, just trying to find the way through fitness for myself and others. I started geeking out on it a long time ago, and then I got into CrossFit for a while and started a gym, and, for 5 years, I was a co-owner of CrossFit Albuquerque, and I was kind of the head coach and programmer where I put together, CrossFit programming for people who we sent a team to the games, the CrossFit Games. They got third, multiple athletes going to a very high level. And at the same time, I started getting folks in that wanted to go to pararescue school or special forces school. I had some elite marathoners that I trained, and in that, part of what I learned is I love training athletes and not necessarily the general public, which is part of why I don't own the gym anymore. Mm-hmm. But I do love training athletes. And so, to answer your first question, what I look for most of all is just commitment. I think people talk a lot and they say they want to be a badass, and then you say, okay, here's the way, and then they don't do it. And a lot of times they give you excuses, but it's really just because it's hard. It's hard work.
One of the really cool things, you and I have talked about it a lot, but I had never used, I wouldn't say, my ski racing days. I ski raced for a long time, and you always have a coach. That's right. A very integral. You can't do it without a coach. But I hadn't gone to a coach, someone like yourself, in 25 years since that ski racing was done. And one of the things that I was so overwhelmed by in the process, which we'll talk process, but was that I kept thinking right off the bat, like, I don't think I could do this. I know I couldn't do this on my own. I think people have a tendency, depending on their personality, is they either overtrain or undertrain.
Totally. But
they don't train the right way. And for me, it was just having the accountability to you. For those of you who are listening, the way we would do it, because Ben lives in Albuquerque, I live in Sun Valley, and I traveled a lot last year in the run up to the games, to the X-Alps, because I wanted to also fly at other places, and Sun Valley is not a great place to fly in the winter, so I had to get hours in the sky as well. So Ben would put my program on we called it the X-Alps Domination. It's like a Google Docs, and he would put on every week, every Sunday, he'd put on the next week from Monday on. Typically Monday was a rest day, so that kind of worked pretty well, but it was, and I would just follow it, and then I would put in the results every day, and then also everything I ate, and then we tracked everything with the Suunto watch, with the Ambit 3, and put everything up in moves count so he could track all the metrics, which was really interesting as time went
Super
on.
interesting.
That was incredibly valuable. But you wrote up in your blog about the training that we did that, you know, one of the really cool things about the training we had was that I never questioned anything you ever did. I always just did it. And I'm not patting myself on the back.
Sure.
The beautiful thing of that was that when you have a trainer, when you have somebody that knows a lot more about it than you do, I just would have felt like if I was doing it on my own, I would have always felt like I wasn't doing enough and it wasn't the right thing. Even if I would have done too much. I was surprised how much rest there was, and I was surprised how much time there was for recovery. And
there's so much there in what you just said, because, you know, I was talking to one of my other athletes, and someone asked her like, what are the qualities of a good coach? And, you know, she gave various answers, but I think it was like 5 qualities. One of the qualities was trust. And I think because we had a personal relationship, I trusted you, and you don't have to have a personal relationship with the coach, but I trusted you because I knew you, that you would do the work. And that sounds dumb to people, I think, sometimes, because they're like, well, what do you care? Well, like, I care because I'm putting the effort in, and
right.
I wanted you to put the effort in. And then you trusted me not to tell you to do something stupid. So that, I think that was kind of like the key cornerstone that I don't really think about a lot, but I think was super important. And then as far as like how to do, what to do, when to do, I mean, there's the, like you said, do the wrong things. That's just the knowledge part. That's you're here to help me fly right now because I don't know a microscopic teaspoon of what you know about being in the air. So you go find people to help you fly, or you're going to crash and bad things are going to happen. And fitness should be like that. I think sometimes it's not. You can pick up Men's Health or any other awesome piece of crap on the internet and make yourself smarter theoretically. But there are a lot of people out there that are geeking out and learning stuff and testing stuff. I mean, that's a big thing. Is I've been trying stuff out on myself and a lot of other people for a long time, so you learn things. But then the biggest part is exactly what you said, which is you just never get it right for yourself. Even when I am doing a big event, I tend to actually get other coaches do my programming because I know I'll make it too hard. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of, not type A, fairly loose people might make it too easy, but you would have just killed yourself. I mean, that was guaranteed that you were just going to murder yourself. And recovery is actually when you get fitter. I mean, you do the work, it destroys you, but the rest time is when the muscles grow and your body relaxes and it adapts. And it's just too hard to do for yourself. I've tried it and I always screw it up, and pretty much everyone I know screws it up because you just make it too hard.
So tell me about when we started October 1st, really. That's right. Officially. Yep. So we had a little over 9 months, like 9 months and 5 days to get me where I needed to be. At the time, walking 5K without a pack was actually, we started off at about that, 5 to 10K, like some pretty easy days. Yep. And my knees hurt, and I was really scared. Remember, I was like, dude, I don't know about this. And that was kind of our thing. We were like, let's give this a month and see how the knees feel. By the end of that month, I didn't have any pain. I never did. Right. The rest of the time, all the way through the race, never had any pain. So, but did you, before we started October 1st, before my first week that went on the Domination, Google Docs, was there a lot of thought that went in, or is this just automatic for you? Like, did you kind of know? Because from my perspective, a month and a half, 2 months in, I was like, where in the fuck do you come up with this stuff? I would read these things. Like, I was down in Australia, we're talking about that, but hypoxic swimming, and burpees at the end of the laps and like weird stuff, like I could, a lot of it obviously came from some of your CrossFit background,
Sure.
but we didn't do that much CrossFit.
No, we didn't.
It was like, but it seemed to me, I mean, one of the reasons that I never had to question you is because it seemed like right from the beginning I could tell you had your eye on the long ball. You had your eye on this long game, even though you were always talking about, okay, what this month is going to look like is hell, and the next month is going to be hell.
More hell.
And more hell, and but we need to create this base so you can handle a lot more hell. And
right.
So, but have you just done it enough that you knew, or was this a totally different exercise? Was this a completely different kind of?
So you were absolutely a unique situation, based on two things. One was the state of your knees that we've talked about, and two was the duration. I mean, and the type of exercise, because a 100-mile foot race is really long, but it's not 1,600 kilometers. I mean, it although it's done differently, it's at a high heart rate instantly, and what we were doing was a little different. So you were definitely a unique situation. In the vertical game, I train a lot of guys to go uphill fast, but not for 10 days in a row. So that being said, I think the methods that I was going to use on a kind of micro level those are the ones I just keep in my head from having done this for so long. And then what I did for you and I do for all athletes is I write out a long-range training calendar, which is basically you go backwards. You start at the race, and you go back to your start point, and you say, here's how many days. We know we have a taper. We know that we want to hit these goals at these times, and just kind of work backwards, and that kind of gets you started. And then, of course, you adjust as you go. I wrote that the first little bit, a lot of it was kind of like, it was like a buy-in. It was like, we're going to put you through 2 or 3 months of work that is not super specific. It's going to allow you to do the work that's going to matter later. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of earning the right to actually train, if that makes any sense. And it didn't feel like it, but I think people shortcut that a lot, and they like, okay, I'm ready to go, let's go now. And then they implode because their body's not actually ready for what needed to be done, which is why you're doing 10K walks, and later, 10K was, an hour and you weren't even warmed up yet. You still had 4 more hours to go. Mm-hmm. And it was just kind of buy-in. But that was built all off the long-range training calendar, and, again, just you. We wanted to suss out, okay, what are you good at? What are you not good at? What's working, what's not, because some of it I definitely changed as we went through from what I'd maybe originally planned, as we kind of saw how your fitness got better, or worse, or not worse, but how it didn't adapt the way I wanted it to. So then you change the training, but definitely a plan to start with. I think that's super key.
Mm-hmm. And it seemed to me, and I've gone back and looked at our Google Docs a lot of times, and I can't specifically pick it out there. There was always a big email every Sunday night that talked about that week, and it was typically 3 weeks. First week's less hard, second week's more hard, third week's the hardest, fourth week's kind of recovery.
Yep.
And then bam, we're back into the new thing. But in general, there seemed to be, to me, like trimester. There was three 3-month blocks that were really focused on different things. And you've talked about that being a little bit backwards of how you're often training for, because this was a unique race in that there was a lot of strength involved because we're carrying the pack, and there's a lot of endurance involved. But there was, like the beginning, like you're talking about, was kind of building the base. Like the first 3 months was like building the base for the hell that was to come. And then there was a huge aerobic period that was, just hours on the treadmill and hours on the rower and hours. I mean, I became like famous in town for the dude walking in tights, just walking down the road to 6 hours on the road. Like you said, it went from 10K to, we were often doing 50, 60K on the ground. But what was talk about that methodology? Is that even right? Because it seemed like it was like each 3 months was kind of its own thing.
Totally, and it is a little backwards. So, classic endurance programming, so we called your first 3 months the base, but it's not what most people would refer to as the base. Most people refer to the base as your low heart rate, big, long endurance training. And you do that kind of early in the season, and then you work on your intensity and your speed the closer you get to your race. For you, what I called the base was, because this was such an all-encompassing sport of you needed to go long, you needed to toughen your feet, you needed to be strong to support your pack, and we'll talk about all that. But I mean, it was everything. So the base was just, like I said, buying in the ability to train hard later. And we focused on strength a lot in the beginning, because you can't become an endurance beast and get really strong at the same time. Like, your body just doesn't like doing that. So we wanted to, while we were building your base and getting you your miles on the road, A, we needed to start small because we needed to let your knees work into it, and B, the whole point was to make your legs strong above and below the knee, so that you could take some of that stress off of your knee. Well, to do that, we had to do the first part. So we did the strength in the beginning while kind of breaking you into the upcoming endurance. But the big difference was we did your speed work, your intervals, before we did the big aerobic base. And part of that was because we were just never going to have you run. Like, that was not going to happen. There's no point. You're not going to win the X-Alps running. But we wanted to make you fast to go uphill if you need it. And we ended up needing it. I remember a specific day, right near the end. And but we knew you were going to be in Europe for 2 months leading up to the race, and I wanted your high mileage, heart rate, all of that functioning smoothly. And again, you can't really train it all at the same time. We put little pieces in. You can always do reminders. But we did your big interval phase more in, I think it was January, right? And that was to kind of take your strength, start priming your engine, and set the stage for your body remembering how to go fast. And kind of my goal was we were going to make you really fast and then know that you were going to lose 20% of it, but it was probably still going to be faster than everyone else while we got your aerobic engine going, headed into the race. So it was a little backwards, but I think it was kind of the right way to go for as weird as this race is.
I'm going to jump ahead, and maybe this isn't the right way to do it, but because it's fresh in my mind, I kind of got crushed. Like, the only time in the whole time, it was like we would do, starting in January, we would do like race, what would you call them, like race emulations?
Yeah, simulations.
Simulations, where we would do, like in January we did 2 days, in February we did 3 days, in March we did, I think, again 3 days, April we did 4 days, May we did 5 days, where it was like, okay, depending on, in February obviously we got a lot of snow, so we're not going to be flying a ton, but we would be like, okay, up at 5:30, exercise, you do stuff all day, go to bed at 11:30, you basically, simulate what the conditions of the race were in terms of sleep and in terms of physical output.
Right.
And those were always these just massive psychological boons for me, because one, it was a real gauge of where I was. I was like, holy shit, I could go 12 hours a day. I mean, remember the one we had in April where it was do as many hike and flies as you can in a day. I did like 8, massive amount of vertical. I can't even remember what it was that day. It was huge.
It was huge, yeah.
And then, then it got too windy to fly, and I texted you and said, hey, what do I do now? And you said, okay, go to the gym and do a half an hour on the rower, a half an hour on the ski, ERG, a half an hour on the bike, a half an hour on the treadmill, and then swim for a half an hour. I was like, holy hell. And I got done with it, and I felt great.
Right.
And it was almost a 7,000 calorie day. That's a big day.
Huge day.
But then in May, the day started to get like, we were talking about this taper in June. The day started to get like, I was looking at it the other day, there was like 4,000 meters, and then 20K. And then another day was like 50K with the pack, and then, some CrossFit type stuff. Like, they were big days. And I remember I emailed you at one point and just went like, dude, when does this taper happen? You know? But you had your view on the long, and you just kept saying, trust me, you're gonna, if you hurt now, or if you're like, remember at one point in the winter, I was like, is it okay that I've been sore for 40 days straight? Like, if you're sore now, that's okay. You won't be sore then. But I guess I don't want to, you the viewer or the listener, I don't want to make this sound like it was hell. It actually wasn't. It was really fun the whole way throughout, because there was never a time ever actually where I was like, I can't do this.
Right.
I'm fucked. Like, Ben, I need to come cry on your shoulder. It was always like, dude, I feel really good. Until like late May, and I was like, when is this backing off? And I think some of that was psychological. It was like, when is this fucking taper gonna happen? But tell me about tapers. Tell me about that process, the end process. And again, like, I'm jumping ahead, but it was a fascinating time for me.
And I'm going to back up just a hair. Part of what you said, where it was like 3 weeks and then a deload week, which is my term for it's not a rest week because Gavin was still doing stuff, but it was significantly reduced volume, is about training hard so your body is stressed and then it compensates and tries to get better, but you got to give it time to get better. And that was then the rest week. So the whole cycle, whatever we did, 6 months.
9 months.
9 months was one never-ending push of compensation in the bigger picture towards the taper, which was then when your body was theoretically going to hit its ultimate peak and you'd be ready for the race. And peaking's hard. There's all kinds of people way smarter than me that try and peak downhill ski racers and Olympic weightlifters, and this one's a little easier because there's so many more variables. We can be off by 2%, it doesn't matter. But part of it, so then we were trying to make it, you don't want to taper too early, and you don't want to taper too long, and tapers suck, because when you're actually tapering, almost universally, every athlete's like, they'll come to you and say, I'm getting less fit, I'm not sleeping good.
I hated it.
Yeah, I mean, but everyone's like that. It's universal because your body's become like
I'd have these like muscle twitches at night that would go for hours and hours and hours. Like, I'd had them in my biceps and my legs.
And that's pretty universal. Just like the taper sucks, so you can't make it too long, but you have to do it, or even if you feel great, you're going into the race tired, and that's just stupid. So part of it, you being in Europe. And we had discussed that, okay, you're in Europe, what's the most important thing to do? Is fly the course. So I knew that everything I put on that sheet, if I got 70% of it done by you, and to tell the audience, Gavin did 100% of everything all the time. But when he got to Europe, that wasn't intelligent, because if he had 5 days of good weather, we knew you'd be hiking, but you need to go fly. So part of it was I put too much in there and assumed you wouldn't get it all done, and you didn't, but you got a lot done. And I think that's one part of it, was that you worked your ass off, and that's why you probably started to feel pretty bad. And the second thing was just, like I said, I think that the overall goal was to take you to the absolute limit as much as we could, and then let you go on the big coast down to the race.
Well, and I think that was, I didn't want to make this not sound humble or overconfident, but it was really interesting being there the week before the race around everybody else. There was a lot of fear.
Yes.
In a lot of people. You know, a lot of those guys looked really scared. And a lot of the guys that had been in the race before looked really scared. And I think that was something that it's just a huge, for my psychology, my head, before the race, because of this long taper, was in a really good place.
Right.
Because I think that training for most of the athletes in the race was pretty limited to hike and fly. A lot of hike and fly. But we had this incredible, and we'd done so much else that I basically I knew one thing that actually didn't end up coming true. I knew I wasn't going to get blisters. I was bragging about it to everybody because we had trained so much on concrete in so many different shoes and always wet feet, and I'd been over in Europe in the wet, shitty weather in May and June, and I'd walked a lot and never had a blister. So I knew I wasn't going to get blisters. That didn't end up working out, but and I knew I could do it. Basically, I knew I could walk 100K a day, day after day, if the weather was just crap.
Right.
And that was amazing.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at the numbers, I think you posted on your blog, you know, by the time we got to the race, I'd done 2,000 kilometers and like 200,000 meters
of vertical.
Yep. Was that in your head before you started, or is that just how it ended up playing out?
Kind of both. So when we first started, I had no real idea because I didn't know how you were actually going to respond to it. Mm-hmm. And then when we got to January, it was kind of when I started putting in my mind and putting on paper, like, okay, you know, by May we need to be trying to do whatever 10,000 meters of vertical gain a week, and we need to be trying to push 150 kilometers on the ground. And then you kind of work backwards from that. And so I didn't have a final number, but that's just what I knew where we wanted you to get, and we wanted to build there. So then it got to that point. Yeah.
Talk about the pack, because that was really interesting to me. The whole race. I know you and Bruce would laugh at this when I say this, but I didn't actually feel the pack. The pack never bothered me ever. You know, I'd be kind of pissed off when you guys would push a big battery on me or something, because I knew I was carrying more weight than everybody else. You know, I had a heavier wing. I ended up changing to the Ice Peak right at the last second, and I wasn't going with a lightweight wing. So I knew I had 2 extra kgs, and I just knew that was making me slower, even though I didn't feel like it.
But it was.
But I knew it was.
Yeah, totally.
And so I would piss and moan, but I actually didn't feel the pack the whole race. It was always just like a joke, you know. Even in all the vertical, you put a lot of time into that. That's not something I would have anticipated, you know, because I think of like a 9 kg pack as a joke, you know, but you really put a lot of time into strength.
Yeah, you know, I kind of my start in the fitness world was I was a young infantry guy in the Army, and what you do is you carry packs a lot, and I was a 150-pound, 22-year-old kid who'd never lifted weights, and I could run really far, and I was fit by that definition. And I remember my company commander was a 240-pound ex-West Point football player, and he couldn't finish a 5-mile run, but we went on a foot march, and he would destroy me and everybody else. And a foot march like 30 miles with 60-pound packs at 13 and a half minutes a mile, which if you've ever carried a pack is almost running.
Yeah.
And part of what I took from that was you got to have a frame. You don't need to be 240 pounds, but you got to have some meat and some mass that's functional to carry your load. And then fast forward 10 years of death racing and training PJs and various people, I just kind of started to figure out that you know, the aerobic fitness part is super important. There's no doubt, but you got to be able to move a load, and even if it's only 9 kgs, and I think yours, I mean, with your water and everything else, it was more than that.
Yeah,
and you go do that for 60 kilometers and tell me how you feel. And most people, if they haven't built a good frame and trained enough, they're going to feel worse about the pack than anything else on their body. I mean, it folds people over, it changes their posture, and then when they change their posture in their upper body, it makes their walking posture change, and then their hips hurt, and then their knees hurt, and with your knee issues, I just knew that like that couldn't happen. You needed to have your normal walking posture, whether it was 300 kilometers in or 10 kilometers in. So kind of what we went about doing was trying to build a frame on your torso and your legs, but that was also part of the knee strengthening that we talk about, and just the ability to go uphill fast. But we put a lot of effort into your torso, which was, you don't want weight for weight's sake. So I didn't want to make you heavy, and we had a lot of discussions about trying to make sure you didn't bulk up too much. And you're a kind of guy who can actually put on mass, I think, pretty easily. But there was an amount that was worth having, because you 10 pounds less than you are now, I don't think would have liked carrying that pack as much.
Right.
So we went about it kind of, classic in a lot of ways. Like you said, we didn't do a lot of, quote, CrossFit. There weren't a lot of your classic, here's a workout and do it till you throw up kind of thing. We did a lot of sets with reps. You squatted a lot. You did a shit ton of pull-ups. We made dips your friend. And we just tried to get you freaking strong.
A lot of push-ups.
And then our favorite move was the sandbag get-up. And for those of you who've never tried it, go build a sandbag. And when you start, if you're a man, make a 50, 60-pound sandbag. And if you're a woman, 20 pounds less. Lay on the ground, put it on your shoulder, and basically you get up with it. And there's some technique to it, but the simple thing is stand up and then get back on the ground. You do that for 10 minutes or 20 minutes or however many minutes you decide to do it. You build a lot of durability and strength in your core and your midsection that will help you carrying a heavy load. So,
I think the sandbag, the get-ups, I don't know how many thousands of those fucking things I did, but the first thing when I went to Europe, before I went, actually, you told me, 20-pounder, 60-pounder, 100-pounder,
yep.
Have those 3 bags, bring the sandbags with you, fill them up with whatever you can find when you get over there, because we didn't have a gym anymore.
Right.
We were moving around. But I think those more than anything else, the kettlebell workout was pretty brutal too, but was one of those things where you'd get done and you could see your body go,
totally,
just grow.
Yeah,
it was incredible. It's of all the movements we did, that one seemed to be the most kind of it would just tighten me up and make me feel really strong. I always just felt like I was kind of like Hulk at the end of those things, like I could just walk through a wall.
Well, I think part of it's that psychological thing, because they're uncomfortable if you've never done them, because getting up and down off the ground is not generally fun, and then when you hang 60 pounds off your shoulder, they're just not comfortable. Mm-hmm. And they're freaking hard. You have to have a stiff core, and it gets really tiring to stand up after a while. So, it is that kind of full range of motion, beast mode. I don't know. You do 100 of those, and it's like running through a wall. It takes determination. So,
but it's really great for everything.
Totally.
It's really good for any. Of course, you get it in your core big time. But so the get-ups. Tell me about the kettlebell workout.
So, I went back and looked, and in general, you had strength training on average twice a week. Mm-hmm. Early in, it was 3 times a week. In general, it was twice a week. And if you took that many weeks times 2, probably 80% of the workouts were all different. But of the remaining 20%, there were 2 workouts in particular that we repeated quite a bit. And one was this 9-station workout that you've talked about. For those familiar, I stole it from John Wellborn of Power Athlete. And the other workout...
Wait a minute, we got to tell about the 9.
Okay.
So the 9-stage workout was... It was just awesome. We did this every week for 4 weeks, sometime in the winter. You have 80 seconds at each stage to complete 2 sets of 10. Basically as heavy as you can do, 10 reps
without putting it down.
So, and it was squat. You'll have to help me out here, but it was squats, bench press, dips, pull-ups. No swing pull-ups, so what do you call it? Your pull-ups.
No kipping pull-ups, strict pull-ups.
Strict pull-ups.
Yep.
Kettlebells, and the kettlebells with like 75.
Yep.
Front squats.
I can't remember.
Lunges and push press.
That's right. Yep.
So it was 9. So you have 9 stages, or 9 exercises, 2 sets of 10. 80 seconds to do it, which basically means with the leg stuff, with the hard, the heavy stuff like the squats and the bench press, you basically do it, rack it, and start again. You're basically just putting it on the rack and stacking right back off. The dips and the pull-ups, you could have a little bit more rest, but my heart rate would always go to my max,
Totally.
almost right off the bat. And so it's it's a short workout, but it's a long workout with your heart rate that high. It's the kind of thing where you feel like you're going to puke.
Yes.
And you end up tossing around quite a bit of weight. But what was interesting for me was the first one was I was just like, okay, Ben's actually trying to kill me. This sucks that bad. And then, but by the fourth week, and you're increasing the weight every time.
Yep.
But by the fourth week, it was like, yeah, I got this.
And you're doing more load.
With more load, and that was a really cool one because it was just once a week, but you could see this massive gain. Like a huge amount of weight gain, like just volume. And but God, it was hard. So anyway, I thought the listener would enjoy that. That was a really cool workout.
And that one was both for fitness and strategically just for your brain,
right.
Because I was, of course, guessing that you were going to get better. It would have sucked if you wouldn't have. But I wanted you to part of the problem when we do these very varied workouts all the time is you get no feedback. Mm-hmm. It's so hard to get feedback when your workouts are always different. So I wanted to give you something you could chew on and go, damn, I'm getting stronger. Mm-hmm. So then the kettlebell workout, so Dan John is this longtime Highlands game strength coach, very well-known, kind of underground guy though, and he wrote this 500 rep kettlebell swing workout, and he wrote it for as a quick way. You do this thing 4 times a week, so you do 10,000 swings in a month, and the whole point was just to lose some body fat and look sexy and everything else. I kind of took that and adapted it for a couple reasons. One, if you've ever swung a kettlebell, you swing it once, it's not that hard. You swing it 20 times, it gets hard. When you start getting into hundreds of reps, a couple things happen. You got to do it right, or bad things are going to happen. It significantly tests your grip strength, which obviously has no direct bearing on the X-Alps, but there's a lot of correlation to people with strong grip are just actually stronger everywhere. Mm-hmm. It freaking spikes your heart rate. And then the biggest thing was it was going to smoke your posterior chain, which is your ass and your hamstrings and your low back. And those things are super important for the race. Mm-hmm. And the biggest reason I did it was just fucking evil, and it was a mind fuck to get it done. Yeah. And a lot of what we did in the weight room was not that. I wanted you just to do work and get out because your test was on the road. But sometimes it was cool to have a little spike of, hey, this sucks ass, see what you can do, and all those other benefits. So Gavin we did the 300, right?
300 and then 400.
Yep. And so you do a set of 10, you set it down, you kind of take a few breaths, you do a set of 15.
No, you do pull-ups.
Yep, I'm getting there.
No breaths.
I'm getting there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're right. No breaths. Basic workout is there is 3 sets of 100 or 4 if you're doing 400, and they're broken up into 10, 15, 25, and 50. And in between those, you do another movement. It could be pull-ups, it could be goblet squats, it could be front squats. That's where you're kind of taking care of the rest of your body. And the goal is you swing your 10, you're right, you go into your pull-ups, then you swing your 15, then you do pull-ups. And the pull-ups or front squats are kind of lower rep. You're not doing 50s of them. And by the time you hit the set of 50, you just look at that bell, because I've done this workout a lot, and you go, I can't do that.
No.
And then it's amazing. You start swinging it, and you get through it. And then you get to set it down and take a little rest before you hit the next 100. But it's if you've never done it, it's a pretty unique experience.
That was another interesting one where there was this radical gain.
Yeah.
The first time with the 300, you wanted me to do it with the 53. I started with the 53. I think I made it 2 of the sets, and then had to jump down to the 44, whatever the next one down is with the kettlebells. I always forget. The next week, when I did it again, I did all of them with the 53, and then the next week we bumped it to 400, and I did all of them with the 53 or the 56, whatever it was. And I still would always look at it and go, I can't do that. But the first time I actually couldn't. I actually had to drop the weight because I couldn't hold on to it.
Yep.
It wasn't really so much. I think by that point, that was already February.
We
March,
were way into it.
We were way into it, and I was strong, but the grip strength, couldn't hold on to it.
Yeah. I think it's grip strength, and then also just learning to basically, like, you're like, fuck you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. There's a lot of that going on.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of grunting on those days. I went to Australia in December, and so this was pretty early on. But
yeah.
It's funny, when I go back and look at the training, I already had made some huge gains. It was pretty interesting. But I went down to fly with Bruce. Bruce was my supporter for listeners. He was kind of our strategist and flying logistics supporter, and Ben was my mountain goat. And he was we kind of broke it up, and you were my ground game.
Yep.
Bruce was the air game. I went down to fly with Bruce for 3 weeks. That was really interesting because we didn't have mountains to train in, except when we were up in Bright. But for the most part, we were in the flatlands, so we didn't have mountains to train in. It was wicked hot. I had a pool. So you kind of, when I first got down there, you were kind of like, okay, well, what do you got? And then, okay, here you go, do this stuff. Leg thrasher, pec trasher, all these different
leg blaster.
Leg blaster,
That's
yeah.
right, yeah.
My God. But you came up with all this different kind of stuff. But from a coaching perspective, you didn't seem to battle very much with. I traveled a lot last year. That was always kind of like, it always seemed like it was no big deal. Like in the I remember doing like burpees and all these funny movements in hotel rooms and walking around the ice
your
in Montana.
suitcase at one point.
Yeah, I was using my suitcase a lot and stuff.
Yeah.
Finding rocks and sand and filling backpacks and that kind of thing. But like in Australia, I did all this swimming. Like, I didn't know how to do. I just kept, Bruce and I kept laughing because the whole time I was down there, like, what the hell? Look at this one. A lot of walking backwards, for example. Like, how did you come up? Is that just your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's really just the experience. The walking backwards. I went to a Rolfer like 10 years ago, and for those of you who've never been Rolfed, try it. It's amazing.
Awesome.
And his I went there because I was a bit fucked up, and he's like, "Are you a runner?" And I said, "Yeah." And I just run a 50-mile race, and he said, "You need to start walking backwards." And he was talking about imbalances. You're always moving forward, and I guess if you walk to your office and sit down, that's all you do. It's no big deal. But go run, 100 miles a week, and it's a lot of forward movement. And he said, try walking backwards, and I really felt it made a huge difference in just kind of resetting me, I guess. And, so that's where I got that from. And the other stuff, same thing, experience. I've trained a bunch of PJ guys trying to go to PJ Indoc, which
what is that?
So a pararescueman is the special forces of the Air Force, and there's a huge swim component because part of their thing is to jump out of the helicopter in the water. And I've also trained a bunch of SEALs, who most listeners know who they are, who are going to BUDS, or wannabe SEALs, I guess I should say. And so, I'm not a swimmer. I've trained triathletes, and then these guys, and I spent a lot of years kind of dicking around trying to figure out what worked, and so that's where you kind of start learning some of this stuff. The hypoxic swims, and basically the theory is you swim the first lap, and I can't remember, you can take a breath every stroke, and then the second lap you can take a breath every two strokes, and so forth until you blow up. And it's kind of a version of Mark Twight wrote some kettlebell breathing ladders. I don't know if we ever did those. And it's about overcoming panic more than actually a physiological adaptation, because we can all get into panic breathing, and that can seriously fuck you up. And for what you were going to do, it seemed appropriate. If you could have a just completely shit fucking death spiral, land in a snowmaking pond at 60 mile an hour down, and they might have to do something. If you'd experience the ability to basically go into panic, control your breathing, and do what you need to do, and for you it's probably always going to be a little easy based on your water background. I imagine you had some terrifying experiences in the water. But that was part of it, trying to find something interesting for you to do. And then just kind of push that anaerobic threshold, because we were in kind of the interval stage then, and basically see what you could do at a lack of oxygen. And that would bring benefits going hauling ass uphill at altitude, where you're losing oxygen because you're going really fast up, and there isn't any oxygen to have anyways because you're 4,000 meters. So, it's not like groundbreaking scientific. We weren't measuring your blood. It was just a history of doing things with folks and going, that worked, and we saw some good benefit out of it, and this didn't work, and I'm not going to do that anymore. So that's kind of where I came up with that. And then the travel part, people make excuses a lot, and athletes make excuses, and coaches make excuses. Coaches are worse. If you're not in their gym and their environment looking at their weights, it becomes hard for them to contemplate what to do. And training mountain athletes and training military athletes, you can't have those limitations. So I kind of just a long time ago learned to just be like, we're gonna make shit up. Like, there shouldn't be an excuse. You're in a hotel room, fine, use some luggage. Do 1,000 push-ups. Maybe it's not the perfect sport specific thing to do that day, but it's good.
You're moving.
You're moving, exactly.
Yeah. Tell me about the I have to emphasize that for me, the variability of the whole thing all the way through was really incredible, because it didn't, I typically wouldn't look at the next day until the night before,
which is wise.
And cool. But it was always just like, oh my God, there was very little repetition, almost none. And in the aerobic stage, there was a lot of just boring stuff that we just had to do. There was a lot of walking. There was a lot of. I went up the hill behind my house 1,000 times. So I got to know the route pretty well. But we always did that kind of differently. We'd either do it in intervals or really fast or pretty mellow. Anyway, there was the variability. I think is another thing you get from coaching. Where it's just you have a real knack for keeping it fun. So thanks for that. But that was, I think, part of what made it really engrossing, and it kind of helped me be all in all the time, was that it was fun. It's actually really fun.
And if it sucks, who wants to do it?
Right.
For one, it sucks. Like you said, if it's snowing and you're walking 60K, you could say that sucks. But if it's just boring all the time, I don't know. You got to be a really hard person to do that. So you want to make it interesting. I also think this sport lends itself to that, because there was just you just didn't know what the hell was going to happen. So I knew all the bases I wanted to cover, but it let me be pretty freeform on how to get there in the kind of micro sense, the daily workout sense. Let's make this one interesting because we can, because every day in the X-Alps was not going to be what we thought it was, and sure enough, it's exactly how it was. They were all different. Yeah.
Really all we had to go with was John Chambers' book.
Right.
We'd seen the videos and everything else, but in there somewhere he commented that his average was 60K a day. Yep. And he did average 4 times. I did it 5 or whatever, but he did, I think, 120,000 feet of vertical. And so that was kind of what we were, more or less. Yeah. That was our kind of end result.
Exactly.
We want to be able to do 60K a day, day after day, and we want to be able to climb Everest 4 times.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point too. I don't want anyone listening to this to think that at the end of the day we were focused on your sport, and it doesn't matter how many kettlebell swings you can do. Doesn't matter what your back squat is. Doesn't even matter what your 60K walking time is. It's, are you going to do well in the X-Alps or not? Your performance in Europe was all that mattered. And I think we did a nice job of using everything as a tool and never getting fixated on a particular day. And you as an athlete did a nice job of that too. You were like, I feel stronger, I feel better, I had a good day, I had a shitty day. You had shitty days too, we all do. But the whole point was just to be better at the X-Alps. And a lot of people, when they get into high volume training, get fixated on the training and forget there's actually a sport at the end of it.
Yeah, I think that was another way to say what you're just saying is, there was always more emphasis on don't miss a flying day ever.
Yeah, totally.
Even if Tuesday was supposed to be one of these massive days, and we had good weather, we'd always switch those days.
Yep.
Always. It was always put the flying first, and that was, what we learned even more. So we knew this going into it. What we really learned in this race is the best pilot wins. Yet again, Kriegel won. It's not because he's the fastest on the ground. It's because he's the best pilot.
Yeah, and you were very. You knew up front. I remember you telling me, you're like, if I do well in this race, it's because I'm going to fly well. But you were like, but it could rain. I still got to hike a lot, and I need to be fit. And that was always kind of our thought was and I think it actually, you became someone in the X-Alps going to hate me for saying this, but I think you were the fittest dude out there, period. But we just needed to make you fit enough, which we did, so that your fitness wasn't a distraction for your flying. And then you flew really well, and first American to the raft. And I think we did a good job of remembering that. And just kind of throughout the thing, it was just, like I said, everything was about let's make you good at the X-Alps. So, we would do X meters when we wanted you to go X fast, and you remember you and I talked a lot. We had pace goals for Gavin walking on the ground and going uphill. But at the end of the day, if he could hike a mountain and feel good and then fly his wing off of it, which he did a lot of, and then do it again and feel good and do it again, nobody actually cared what the time was. You just cared that you just did 12,000 meters of vertical gain and 20K on the ground and flew and felt good. That was the goal, because that's what the race is.
And I think you've made a comment many times about other athletes that you've trained. There's no need to make them better. What's your quote for? You only need them good enough.
Yeah, totally. It's all about economy. You just need to be good enough to be good enough at your sport, and good enough is winning in theory, but if all you needed to do was be, as an example, if a 225-pound back squat equaled good enough, and we didn't use numbers, like I didn't care what his numbers were, then that's good enough. Right. Why would we spend time and effort chasing fictitious numbers like, Gavin, I want you to have a 300-pound back squat? Well, who cares? Right. I just want you to be good enough. And good enough for you was, do your knees feel good? Are you hitting some reasonable paces on the ground? Can you go uphill fast? And then the next day, do you feel brand new? Those were kind of our standard metrics.
So I'll just jump into the for the listener to give you we posted all this stuff during the race, and we were trying to do blogs and stuff. Red Bull's phone completely sucked, so the blog system was kind of a failure, which was unfortunate. So some of them never made it up, but to kind of recap the race, things went really, really well for us right off the bat. Had a couple really bad days. Pulled one of my first night passes, I think night 3. Walked all night. My feet really went to hell. Actually, day 2, really early on. Yeah. I was with Aaron Gotti. I think he and I were together most of the day, and got lost and hiked up this horrendous hill, and it just trashed both of our feet. We both got really dehydrated. We were in bad shape, but because we got lost, took the wrong trail, and then it was wicked hot in the race. Yep. We had this huge heat wave hit Europe a few days before the race started, and it kind of hung in there through about the third day of the race. So it was really hot on the ground and very humid. And both Aaron and I's and quite a few other athletes' feet went to absolute hell. Bad days, and then we had an amazing day 8, after a very hard day 7, and I just pulled the pin on the whole thing, and we rested, and then Ben and I went up to a really high launch above Bellinzona and had a massive day. Got back into 7th and had 7th pretty much wrapped up until the end of the race, and then I had a terrifying flight and really shouldn't even be here talking to Ben. It was amazing that I lived through that one, and anyway, that's all on the website. But because this is a fitness thing, we pulled the other night pass that I had to use, the second one, the last night to try to catch Ferdinand Van Chelven, who had overtaken me that day and moved into 7th, so I was in 8th. That wasn't going to happen. He was too far ahead anyway, but I tried. Yep. And I went really hard that night, and my feet were just mangled. So with the exception of that last day, I felt amazing the whole race, other than my feet. And even that last day, you and I climbed that 700 meters to do that last little flight that didn't end up working out for us, and it took like 3 hours, which is three times slower than my normal pace. That would normally be an hour. So clearly I was worked. Yep. But even then I didn't feel physically that bad. The feet thing is something you and I don't think really have solved yet. We've talked about that a lot, and we've got some work to do to figure that out. Some guys in the race were using sandals, on the long walks. That was pretty interesting. Anyway, we'll do an update on the podcast until we figure this out, because we thought we had that wired.
Totally.
Right? My feet were just calloused bricks before the race, and so, but they did go to hell. But the recovery. So, Will Gadd told me one of the reasons he did not want me to do this race when we did the Rockies Traverse last year, he talked about 6 months and really a year, like 6 months for his feet, but it was like a year before he really recovered. Nate Scales, who was on the last podcast, great podcast, you guys should all listen to that, it was fantastic. He did it in 2007. He was a year. His feet were mangled for a year. Other than my blisters, which were like 2 weeks, and my feet looking like hell, I didn't feel bad ever. Right. I really, you told me not to move for a month when I got home, don't exercise and get almost kind of like out of shape, which was actually really quite nice. That was kind of a nice thing to do, but I'm not trying to brag. What I'm trying to say is like that's remarkable in a number of ways, I think. But did we miss anything? Did we mess up? Was that your kind of, could you have anticipated that?
No, I'll be totally frank. I thought that you would be in worse shape than you were. I'm stoked you weren't. I think it's a testament to the work you put in. I think you're obviously a little bit of just a genetic freak, which is cool. I think our ramp ups and ramp downs probably helped a little bit. I mean, you had the ultimate shit fest, which was the race. Taking that break, I think your body probably went like, cool. I'm back. I remember this part. I can rest and recover. I just don't know. You turned into a beast, and I can't say it's not that you didn't go hard, because you went balls out every time. And for the listeners who didn't know, I was as he mentioned, I was one of his supporters. So I went up the side of a mountain with Gavin a lot, and he's friggin' fast. I mean, you were hauling ass, and you went hard every moment of every day. And that last day should have torched you for 2 weeks, and it didn't. And I think our training was just good.
Would you change anything the next time?
I don't know. We were talking about that the other night, and I think I haven't fully digested it yet. I think when we get closer, I'm going to kind of shove my nose into what we did harder. I don't know. I mean,
to me, if we could sort out my feet,
totally.
I'd like to do the exact same program. You were telling me that you were going to change it and move things around. I mean, for me, it was like perfect.
Yeah.
For me, it was like the last, that last night. We started. I landed at like 9 p.m. right on the dot. I had that amazing flight, and basically started jogging for about 3 hours, and then I couldn't jog anymore because my feet were killing me, and then walked until whenever we got to pay the next day, 5 p.m. or 4 p.m. or whatever it was, so it was a awfully long night. And, I was hallucinating that night, and I kept thinking that Ferdinand was standing on the side of the road waiting for me, and weird shit went down that night for sure. And then you and I got lost in brambles and
That was awesome.
That was awesome. That was rad. And, it was, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say it was easy. That was, but it was, I think it was 110K.
Well, it was what we said it was going to be. I remember talking to you that night, and you're like, what do you think, should I walk or should we wait? Because we had an option to where we could sit tight, and there was a launch nearby, but once we passed that launch,
that was it.
Yeah. So it was like, do we fold and try and fly tomorrow and
come in sexy, or do we try to beat this guy?
Right. And I had no opinion to Gavin other than, if you go, it's going to hurt. And I think I remember telling him, like, it's just going to suck, but you can do it. And you chose to suck, and you did it. So I mean, it was exactly what we thought it was going to be. I don't know. I mean, I guess when I said I would change stuff, I don't mean the overall thought, because I do think it worked. Mm-hmm. I'm just a tinkerer, so I can't give you the same workouts in the same order. That would feel like cheating.
That'd be like a chef serving the same meal. They just don't do that.
Yeah, you just don't do it.
Right.
But I don't know. I really can't. I would have no good reason to change much of anything, because you performed just better than I even thought you were going to do, and I should mention, because we somehow didn't talk about it, although it was so key, was he had nightly recovery and mobility work, and yoga and stretching, and a lot of tenets that I've learned from Kelly Starrett that he now uses, and that piece can't be overlooked at how important it was. Yeah,
I can't believe we didn't talk about that. Yeah, right in the beginning, the first week when we started in October, Ben sent me a list of stuff that I had to get, a roller, bands, a lacrosse ball, and Kelly Starrett's Supple Leopard. I just talked to Kelly and did that. You guys will all see that here shortly. I think that'll be out. I had a really fun talk with him last week. But for those of you who don't know, he started San Francisco CrossFit, and he's done a lot of Olympic training, and Kelly's a badass. And he has a book called Supple Leopard that we used religiously. I took that thing around the world with me for a year for mobility and keeping my knees good and keeping my body good. And that was remarkable. And it wasn't hard work. That was always 10 or 15 minutes every night. And then we made it a rule. So the Red Bull, in the race, you have to stop at 10:30. You can't move unless you pull a night pass. And our thing always was we'd stop at 10:15, and no matter where I was, and you guys would set up camp somewhere along the road that made sense. But basically 10:15 was our stop point. We always gave it that extra 15 minutes because we thought sleep was as or more important than anything else, and so we didn't want to cut into the sleep aspect of it. So I'd rock up to the van, and you'd have my carpet all laid out and all my stuff, and hammer that, and then hit the sack. So I'll close it on kind of a fun story. The whole way through the race, like literally every day, from the time you and I were walking up the Geisberg, like half an hour after the gun started, right. July 5th, we were like, let's go ahead and do this again, because this is rad. Like, it was rad. We had so much fun, and you and Bruce were hysterical, and, as you know, I'm writing this book about this whole thing because it was so fun. I don't know if I've had that fun doing anything. I don't know if any of us have.
I don't think I've ever had that much
radical.
Fun.
It was such a fun thing. The one sobering moment that I'm still kind of dealing with is the night we got into Monaco, and I sat down with Aaron and Guschelbauer and Petio and all the guys that had gotten in before me. It was like swapping horror stories and
right.
stuff you probably used to talk about it more. Like everybody had these phenomenally scary stories to tell and moments during the race. And I guess, I knew that going into it. We all did. It's the X-Alps. You're going to have some really scary moments. But at the time, I was kind of like, I think this is an unacceptable level of risk. And then an hour later, I was like, I can't wait to do it again. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there.
So I guess what he's saying is we'll see you in 2 years for the next edition.
Yeah. It was so awesome. Well, thank you very much. I think that was cool. I hope you all enjoyed that. And if you have any questions, please put them in the blog. When I put this up on the Mayhem, there's a place for comments at the bottom. If you got a question for Ben or me about the training, then we're more than happy to answer them. Ben's website is thesnowgoat.com. There's all kinds of valuable information on there, and he's super, as you can tell, super into this. And if you're an athlete and you want to get better, go talk to him. I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did. It was always cool. It's always cool sitting down with Ben. He's quite a personality. That guy is a complete badass. If you enjoyed this podcast or the others, we'd love for you to put something out on your social media channels. Hit us up on Facebook or Instagram or whatever you like to do. You can certainly find us on all of those. I finally got iTunes all figured out, so you can now subscribe to us on iTunes. You'll find all those links on my website. And again, Ben's website, if you're interested in training or health or any of those things like he talked about, you can find him on thesnowgoat.com. As always, in light of and following the footsteps of Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, one of my favorite podcasts, all we ask for is a buck a show that helps keep us on the air. It's something I'll continue to do. We've got a couple of great shows coming up with Josh Cohn and Matt Syndergaard and Will Gadd. I keep promising Will Gadd. He is a hard dude to pin down, but one of these days I promise I will. And until the next time, thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed it. See you on the next Cloudbase Mayhem.